a couple of points, but the main one is that you can get great stuff down on tape from people by having them relaxed and not feel like they're being confronted by a host in an interview talking about the governor. All right, joining us now, Rob Sampson, state senator from Wolcott. He is busy now that the session is over, running around doing normal life, which has to fall by the wayside during a session, doesn't it, Rob?
Yes, indeed. That's an understatement, Todd. Good afternoon.
Nice to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. So we're, where we're at. What are your thoughts about where we're at right now, and what things to focus on, what things to be aware of, what things to be excited about?
Well, I've been enjoying your show this afternoon, and I think your callers have been making great recommendations. But I think, when the legislative session is not going on, and it is...
Rob, another one. Another cell phone connection bites the dust. What is it? We're being haunted by bad cells. We're talking to Rob Sampson. So Rob is a libertarian-leaning guy and a hardliner in terms of standing up for the American system of government. That signal okay, Rob?
I hear you just fine. Sorry about that.
Okay, you're back. That's life in the... we used to have a cable. If we wanted a car phone, we had to have a cable that went out the back of it and followed us everywhere. But now we're a little more mobile, and it comes with a price. So, yeah, you were starting to say.
I was saying that, when the session is not going on, that's a wonderful time to start talking about the culture. Because, public policy, the bills and laws that go through and affect our lives, they all come downstream from the culture. And I think our culture, to your earlier caller's point, is part of the problem. I think people, as you mentioned, we live in a very affluent society. People are less engaged with keeping track of what their government is up to because there's no reason to. If your life is good and you've got a paycheck coming in and you have a happy life and you can pay your bills. But sadly, what happens in those times is the government starts to take liberties. And when I say take liberties, they take liberties away from people, passing more and more laws and gaining more and more control over society. And I think that's where we are.
One of the issues that just occurred to me when you were saying that about affluence is that that people who have enough money, and this can be somebody middle class or it could be somebody filthy rich. People who have enough money are fairly, or can be, I should say, fairly mellow about the idea that the government wants to take more. Oh, it's only another $2 per week. Why should I worry about that? And it's easy to fall into that framework of viewing the plunderers as opposed to being appalled at how much they take already and how poorly it's spent, and how they never go back and scrutinize a budget and figure out how to make the spending more efficient or check a program to see if it's time to cut it out. Never, never, never. And people don't notice how they get lied to and how the spin covers up the stuff they should understand that they're not hearing from anybody. It's a really hostile environment if you're a citizen who's trying to do the right thing.
Right. I have two separate thoughts about that. One of them is that I think people on the more progressive left-wing part of the spectrum, when the Democrats are in power, the Democrats are passing a bunch of policies that they like, mandating vaccines and demanding masks and COVID passports and things like that. And they're in favor of those things, so they don't bother them that much. And I think, when you start to see a shift in more types of controls that are affecting people in a way they don't like is when they start to wake up and push back. And I don't think that's really happened in Connecticut yet. But I think it's destined to, because the Democrats can't help themselves. They continue to push more and more and more. And at some point, they're going to run into some liberty or freedom or tax on a citizen that's going to get them angry and get them pushing back. And the other thought I was just going to I'll share with you is the Declaration of Independence itself. It says that mankind is more disposed to suffer while those sufferings are tolerable, basically, rather than to right themselves and throw off the government. And I think that's where we are. I think people stay at a bad job or in a bad relationship rather than changing it because it's easier than the conflict and the work involved. But hopefully we're going to reach a point where people throw off the bad government we have in this state.
Well, I think it's hard to see, too, and that's part of it, particularly where it's possible for the focus. Government has the power to shift the focus of what people are thinking about and how they're interpreting what they're thinking about, how they're viewing events and the context they put them in. For example, Obama in 2012 ran his reelection around this whole idea of income inequality, and people absorb those explanations and those arguments and repeat them without ever testing them to see if they make any sense. And I would argue that there's a lot of nonsense in this whole concept of income inequality to point to that and say that's the problem. And you hear all these serious people say it. Income inequality, it's the big problem. So let's get rid of the rich people in Connecticut. We'll get rid of the income inequality and we'll be much better off. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm delighted to hear you bring up that topic because that brings us back to the notion of the culture war and what we do need to change, which is the rhetoric that is permeating our society. It's happening in our government every day, but it's also every...
Uh-oh. There goes that cell phone trick again. Rob Sampson's got one of those trick phones that can do a disappearing act, and they don't even have to... There's no sign that goes on. It just disappears. 860-522-9842. We're talking to Rob Sampson, state senator from Wolcott. I suspect there's a little button in the governor's office, and you can just push it and quiet your phone down whenever he needs to.
It's either that or the planned obsolescence of the iPhone that I'm using, forcing me to buy a new one.
Well, the iPhone, you could go a cheaper route, a more economical route. You don't have to say married to those Apple products who are that company that is so in the bag with China right now.
Indeed. I don't know where I lost you.
Well, it was a good point, so just repeat everything.
I was just talking about your allusion to the culture war and income inequality and all of that, and just wanted to elaborate on how it's permeating our society and the discussion about critical race theory is hot in the news these days. I've been getting a lot of press coverage on that, and of course being attacked by the left for being called a racist for having the nerve, Todd, of wanting to judge people solely on their merit and content of their character and ignoring what race they are. Apparently that's racist in the view of the left in this country today. But what I'm surprised most about is the fact that they are backing off on what they've been saying so loudly for the last several years. When no one was pushing back, they were more than happy to tell you that America is a racist country and that white people have privilege and you're automatically racist. You need to come to grips with that if you're a white
supremacist.
Right, exactly. And now their reaction is, oh, no, Senator Sampson, you're a crazy person. And all of these people, including the many parents and folks that showed up in Guilford a few days ago to have a public outcry about this issue, we're all crazy. That's not what's going on. They're just simply discussing, the perils of racism and the desire to have more diversity. And then that's just baloney, and we know it. We know exactly what they've been teaching and the way this has gone, and I think people are waking up to it and pushing back, and it's a beautiful thing.
It is because they're so scared. The left is scared about what they're doing and the rhetoric they're spreading, and they're trying to spin it that they're not spreading it at all, and this stuff isn't going on in schools. It's not being taught. But, of course, these... the pressure that they put people under, especially in academic environments, to put them in fear and thus kill the intellectual purity of what is supposed to be going on in places of education and higher ideals. It's very destructive, and people cave right into it. And you see administrators in schools, I'm sure you've got stories about this from your district, where there are administrators in school who are repeating these messages that the left is pushing that contain or come from the critical race theory. And maybe you've got an example or two you could give us on that.
Well, I can tell you that, I hear from everyone. I'm hearing from parents and students in my district and across the state now, because I've been pretty outspoken on this issue. I've got people writing me from all over. But it's not just them. I'm hearing from teachers who work in these schools about the things that they see and are required to do, and how they're afraid to speak up on their own. And it's happening everywhere. It's not just in school. Obviously, you're seeing it in the corporate environment more and more. The frustrating part, Todd, is that the left wants to immediately attack and suggest that people like me, because I put forth an amendment in the state Senate to prevent teaching of these divisive concepts, to say that somehow I'm trying to censor things, or I'm trying to stifle intellectual debate or rewrite history. And it's exactly the opposite. I'm trying to prevent them from doing that. The only thing my amendment would do is prevent someone from suggesting that any particular race is better than any other race, or that any person should be made to feel badly or guilty because of their race based on past history. Not that the history should not be taught, because I believe it should. And I actually don't even mind if these concepts are taught if they're done in an honest and fair way. The problem is they're not.
There's no chance of that.
Right, and we're talking about young children. I mean, we don't teach young children every fact in the world. We don't teach young children how to build bombs or create poison, because it's not wise to do in the classroom. And I look at this as a bomb or poison, trying to teach young kids that their race is determinative, and that, if they're going to be a minority, they're going to end up in a life as a victim and constantly oppressed. Or if they're a white person, they should feel anguish and guilt about their supposed ancestors. And that's all nonsense. You know that as well as I do. And I think kids, the beautiful thing about them is that they are, in fact, colorblind. And I think it's just so wrong to taint their view of the world with it.
Yes. All right, Rob Sampson, thank you. Good to talk with you. Appreciate you coming by.
It's always my pleasure. Thanks, Pat.
We'll talk to you again soon. State Senator Rob Sampson from Wolcott. Senator Rob Sampson from Wolcott. Senator Rob Sampson from Wolcott. Senator